Finally, we come to my favorite, which is word usage. And the reason it's my favorite is I believe that I love the English language, and I believe it's probably one of the most, I would say the most, expressive in the world. It has more words in the English language than any other known language. The English language has 500,000 practical words in the Oxford Dictionary, the big one, plus another nearly 1 million scientific words, which have been written as if they were English. So it's a marvelously, marvelously expressive language. So how did they use the power of words? Did they use the 5 or 6 powerful tools of words to really grab you? And I'm going to give you a few examples of the most powerful tools, and then I want to read you a few examples from one of the greatest speeches ever written in human history to show you how they work. Did they use the powers of omnimatopia? Horrible word, I don't even know how to spell it. I'm sure I spelled it wrong, but that doesn't matter. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. I'm sure I got it wrong. Is it close?
I don't know. I'm just trying to memorize it.
Sounds like a disease of the throat. No, that's Polish, I'm sorry. Don't go there. Omnimatopia is the power to use words that sound like the action you are describing. I'll give you a couple of examples. The sword swished. I can imagine what swords do. If you move them fast enough, they do swish. The bee buzzed. That's what bees do, apart from stinging. He bulldozed his way through the crowd. Bulldoze, the sound of boom, covers what they were doing. That's omnimatopia. Did they use it? Alliteration. Alliteration is a continuance of the same beginning sound in 2 or 3 consecutive words. It's a very powerful tool. I'll give you some examples. The sun silently sank into the valley. S, S, S. 3 times. Don't do it 2, don't do it 4. There's something magical about 3. The sun sank silently. He looked at his enemy with cold, calculating contempt. Wow. But don't overdo it, as in her sensuous smile summoned several suitors to her sumptuous suite. Don't do that. 3 times is about all we can take. Hyperbole. Did they use hyperbole? Hyperbole is where you exaggerate a situation dramatically to make a point. As in, I've told you 1,000 times, don't put your face in the soup bowl. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Well, you couldn't actually eat a horse. I've eaten horse meat and it's kind of nice, but I couldn't eat a horse. His heart exploded in 1,000,000 pieces. A smile. Well, it didn't really explode in 1,000,000 pieces, but it was pretty close. All right. Then there's metaphor. Metaphor takes hyperbole and expands it by creating pictures, dramatic pictures, which in themselves are quite ridiculous, but they emphasize the point. Examples. He fought like a lion. Final thing is, or the penultimate, is something which I really like a lot, and that is anaphora. That is the repetition, 3 times, of the opening phrase of a subject. Anaphora combined with metaphor is one of the most powerful tools in speaking. And when you're evaluating, did they use any of those tools? The last one is comparison. Dramatic comparisons between 2 realities. Then and now. Black and white. Freedom and tyranny. Okay, these will impress you. So these are the basic areas that you will evaluate. I'm beginning to run out of time, I believe. So what I have run out of time, so I'll just leave you with one small thing. I'm going to read you 3 paragraphs. of what I consider is the greatest speech ever made in human history. And I've listened to many, many of them. This one exceeds Mark Antony's Friends of Roman Countrymen. To me, it exceeds Churchill's "We'll fight them on the battlegrounds, on the beaches," etc., etc. It exceeds Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. This was the I Have a Dream. 1965, Martin Luther King. In my opinion, that speech changed human destiny. And if anyone wants me to explain why, I'd be delighted to tell them. To me, that was the beginning of a total reformation and change in the concept of Western liberalism. Let me give you 3 of his paragraphs. What I'm going to do is I will ask this side to put their hands up when they hear anaphora, repetition of the opening phrase. This side, I want you to put your hands up every time you hear a metaphor. Okay? And I will try to do this in the American accent, because the English accent just doesn't do justice to a wonderful speech like this.
Oh my goodness.
You have to be Churchillian to make a speech like this, and I'm not Churchill. And I'll see if I can do it the way Martin Luther King did. Anaphora, metaphor. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society, and finds himself in exile in his own land. That's powerful use of both. One more paragraph. Have I got another minute?
Please.
Okay. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all of God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. And I'll give you one more, and then I'm finished. The reason I quote this is I think this is such a magnificent oration. There are those who ask, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue, cannot gain lodging in the motels of our cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as our mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York has nothing for which to vote. No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Wow, that is eloquence. So Dolores, thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you. That was a wonderful way to end with such a motivating speech.